and welcome to the World 2050. And my name is Sangeeth Varghese. I'm the president of IFSPD Europe, one of the largest international institutions in the sustainability space. And while I'm there, I think on the future of democracy, leadership, and education. I also think through history on how random, obscure events connect and has built the world that we live in today, rather than any conscious or concerted effort as far as the human beings are concerned. And today I am joined along with Dr. Karine Sargsyan. She's very particular about me pronouncing her name. So it is Dr. Karine Sargsyan. She is an Armenian-Austrian medical doctor, geneticist, biobanker, researcher, foresight, scientist, and educator. Any more credentials, she would be as good as Dr. Isaac Newton. She currently serves as a scientific director at the Onco Biobank at the Cedars Sinai Medical Center in Beverly Hills, California. And she is also the managing director for the International Biobanking and Education at the Medical University of Graz, Austria. The second panelist, Dr. Tamas Landesz, again a great friend, Director Administration and Finance at the World Health Organization at their Western Pacific region based in Manila. Dr. Landesz worked across 5 continents with multiple international organizations, including the United Nations system and the European Union. Dr. Landesz holds a PhD from Paris and an MPA from Harvard University. And together, along with Dr. Karine Sargsyan and Dr. Tamas Landesz, the thing which connects the 3 of us is that we have published our book in 2023, which is titled Future Intelligence, the World in 2050. And along with us, a new friend has joined in, all the way from Davos, Dr. Marga Soler. She's a head of science diplomacy capacity building at the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator. She's a global leader in science diplomacy, recognized for her pioneering work bridging science, technology, and international affairs to address global challenges. In 2022, she launched the Geneva Science Diplomacy Week to equip leaders with anticipatory insights, skills, and mindsets on cutting-edge scientific breakthroughs. And what connects Tamas, Marga, and I are that we are part of the World Economic Forum, Young Global Leaders. I think Tamas is the batch of 2010 along with me. Marga is much more junior compared to us in 2020. So here we go on air on the world in 2050, 25 years from now. And the first question is to my friend Karine. So Karine, so from your perspective, what are the most critical global challenges that we will face in this world in the next 20 to 30 years? And the second part of the question, how can the world effectively address them?
Interesting question and a challenge to answer, because I think we will have several challenges. We will have some of those that we have now, and we will have some of that we actually may be predicting, but don't yet know. But I think, as actually also a psychologist myself, that fear may become one of the biggest challenges. because the information amount that we are getting through global connectivity that we have nowadays is so high that this information overload can bring much more psychological and psychic problems. In one hand, what we are already seeing from the statistics that we have at WHO, but from other side, also getting all the time being in fear because knowing on my app that in 2 miles down, somebody got robbed her wallet. And many years ago, we didn't knew that. So I think this fear may change many things. And in one hand, that can bring us more security, because if you are afraid of something, you are trying to build security. In other hand, this fear can bring us to stop to develop, which this part of the fear I don't like. And I think the bridge builders in different situations will be education, 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 science, 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 and honesty. It's my perspective. I hope that I know you expected me to say the great technological development and everything, which is true. But this is who everybody knows. And I think we need to deal with the overload of information, and we need to build being with the situation that is we are humans. With being human is the most important thing. You are muted, Sangeeth. You are muted.
What would I do without you, Karine? What would I do without you? The interesting part about Karine is that whichever profession which I talk about, she is part of that profession. Whether it is research, whether it is genetics, whether it is medicine, and now psychology. And now you keep giving me a.
I have a degree in psychology. I have a master's degree in psychology. I'm very sorry.
I feel guilty every time you tell me about your IQ compared to my IQ. But great answer, especially from the fear perspective, especially from the humanism perspective, especially since we have been having an overload of technology. So Marga, I'm coming to you because you are dressed so sharp, and I envy you. You are at Davos at this point of time.
Thank you, Sangeeth. It's so good. Oh, so good to be here and to connect from Davos, where everything is happening in real time. I hope to be able to give some perspective of how this week is going to unfold, right? And I think the question of the global challenges, I think we can take two perspectives: the short term and the long term. And you guys wrote a book, the 2050. I work on science and technology anticipation, which looks at 25 years from now. But what people has in mind here right now in Davos and the rest of the world, today is January 20, very big events are happening on this very moment, is the short term, right? So if you look at how do we bridge the short and the long term, for me, is the most important skill and mindset and answer that we need to be able to get to 2050 in better shape than we are today. And how forums like this and how communities like the ones we are part of that you just described can really move the needle towards positive futures and not risky or fearful or negative futures. So a few days ago, ahead of Davos, the World Economic Forum released the 2025 Global Risks Report. And as you know, this is a report that compiles how people around the world feel about certain risks. And it's interesting because they take a 2-year perspective and a 10-year perspective. The 10-year perspective, it's all about climate change. It's all about biodiversity collapse. It's about the planetary boundaries and the collapse of ecosystems and extreme weather events. Those are the four first on the list. But when you look at short-term events and short-term risks, it's misinformation, disinformation, political polarization, societal polarization, conflict, war, etc. So I think what the problem that we have is that the short-term challenges don't allow us to really put in place the systems that we need to address those long-term challenges. And then when the long-term challenges manifest earlier than expected, like the devastating fires, for example, in LA, or pandemics, which we knew that they were coming, they were always on this risk list of the WEF, but nobody thought they were going to come so soon. Maybe Tamas can give us the perspective from WHO in that sense, right? So how do we put in place systems that allow us to deal with the short-term emergencies of today and prepare for the future and make sure we don't lose sight of what we need to do today for that. So from the perspective of my work, I work in Geneva in a multilateral organization, multilateral startup called Geneva Science Diplomacy Anticipator. And what we do is exactly that. It's anticipation. It's looking at what's coming to us in terms of scientific and technological breakthroughs and preparing for them today, even if we might not need to deal with them until 10 years from now, for example. One example is quantum computing. Quantum computings are not yet tangible in the world. You cannot have a quantum computer in your office. But when these computers are here with us, they are going to be so powerful that they can de-encrypt all of our national security classified systems, all of our government documents, all of our state secrets, all of our bank passwords, all of our email, right? So if we sit and wait until quantum computers are here, and then one day they arrive, it's going to be all crisis and panic and fear and, oh my God, we should have seen this coming. A little bit we have it with AI. AI is now out into the world, but we're still kind of pulling our hairs. Oh, we should have done governance. We should have thought about the governance. Should have thought about the ethics. We should have thought about, equity and access. All these questions. But now it's too late. We cannot roll it back and say, oh, let's go for a moratorium in the development of the technology, because we just realized that we were not ready yet as a society to make the most of it and minimize risk. This is one example. But there are so many fields of science and technology that are going to bring us those dilemmas, from neurotechnology, from gene editing, from climate technology, and of course, digital technologies, artificial intelligence, and cyber. So I think we need to have this dual approach. We need to have a short-term system to address what's happening today, and to put in place those anticipatory systems to prevent the bad stuff from happening. And you know what's always a challenge in anticipation and foresight, and I'd love to discuss with the rest of you, is that when you prevent something bad from happening, nobody gets credit. Nobody wants to invest and fund preparation. So pandemic preparedness, why is it so hard to achieve a pandemic treaty? Because first of all, it's very long term. So the minister that's in place now is not going to be the minister that's in place in 10 years. So then how do they get political credit? So we have also a disconnect between the timelines, the timeframes of political cycles versus the cycles of the earth, the cycles of the planet, and the cycles that we need to achieve sustainable development, right? So all of these kind of dual speeds that we are having in our society. And also the third one I would bring to your attention is the inability of the nation state to deal with global challenges, and how we keep organizing ourselves into units of nation states, when most of the challenges we deal with are transboundary, international, and they need multilateral cooperation. But we see the world leaders going against that and retreating back into nationalism and protectionism, tech sovereignty. And that is really not the direction that the planet and society needs to go, but is what's happening right now. And we'll hear a lot about it this week. And I really look forward to getting all these perspectives from the world leaders, from the international organization, from the businesses and how they react, and of course from civil society and the citizens. So this is the outlook for Davos, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more once we kick off the week here in Switzerland.
Very interesting perspectives, Marga. Very interesting perspectives. So compared to the last time we did this together, in the World 2050 50 together, one of the things which I'm noticing is the undercurrent of fear, which both Professor Karine as well as Marga mentioned it, right? So rather than the optimism part of it, for some reason I'm missing the optimism this time. I'm from both the speakers, I'm hearing more of pessimism, more of fear, more of how do we tackle short-term as well as long-term challenges. So, which is a place where I'm coming to Dr. Landis on what is your anticipation? Is it optimism? Is it pessimism? What should we be prepared for as we look at the short term, which is about 5 years from now, and probably 25 years from now? What should we be prepared for?
Thank you very much, Sangeeth, and hello everyone. And indeed, as you said in your intro, I'm a cautious but unbending optimist. I think, remain an untreatable optimist, and that is because I think in the human spirit and our ability to innovate even in very difficult situation and crisis. So I do believe that that even in this relatively difficult situation in which the world is finding itself, and what both Karine and Marga alluded to, we can come out at a better end. You know, as we saw in history so many times, crisis usually ignites evolution. Yeah, and I believe in that. And interestingly, when we wrote the book, which binds us all together, looking at the future 2050, of which, oh, by the way, Marga also was part of, because she wrote the introduction, as you remember. So when we did that, and we interviewed more than 100 young global leaders and others, it was interesting to see that the vast majority of these people who come from across the globe, different sectors, they're also optimistic about the future. You know, we did not hear anyone talking only or purely about the next world war and Armageddon and the end of the world, but everyone who we interviewed is thinking of possible solutions, possible ways for humanity to prevail, and that is the spirit that I think is what I believe in, and that I think is very important, especially in the upcoming phase of evolution of our race. The technology is evolving like we have never seen before. I know that the current topic in Davos, where Marga is walking the streets, is AI for development. Last year it was the future. So technology and AI is everywhere, right? But AI without a human side is not worth talking about. What technology will help us, I hope, and this is where we have to work on, and Marga's work with JESDA is critical on trying to create a framework for ensuring that evolution of the technology remains within ethical boundaries, and also it serves humanity. But these new technologies should have a human component and should help us actually to come closer. That's the goal, but also the challenge, right? How we evolve these new technologies that will help us to remain also human and keep its humanistic side, bring us all closer together and ignite that evolution that I was alluding to. Let me just give you some examples also, which are very recent but could point in the future, and that's from the health dimension where I work currently in the World Health Organization. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, as you know, the member states of WHO, they started the global collaboration called COVAX to distribute vaccines equitably in the world. And that was beautiful. You know, it brought people together. It was a global crisis. It was the spirit of the United Nations collaboration was at this forefront. But at the same time, it also highlighted disparities in access to vaccines. So it was great on one side, but also highlighted many problems. And that's the challenges that we face probably with most things where we find solutions. But while we are bringing people together, new issues come to the surface, like the disparities in access, or currently uh, the the pandemic treaty under negotiation, which is still not unfortunately sealed, because it's not easy to agree on how to distribute information and share information among member states, how to distribute those vaccines equitably in case of a future pandemic. So I think that's a very concrete example of both the opportunities and challenges that the global crisis pose for us as a race, but also raises the opportunities in terms of how technological innovation and human innovation ideas can propel us to a more positive future.
I'm absolutely loving this discussion. Absolutely loving this discussion. So the new perspective which I'm getting from Tamas is, of course, the undercurrents Karine as well as Marga has been mentioning, the humanism part of it. When the world at large is talking about technology and especially the artificial intelligence is such an overawing thing above all of us, right? So here we are sitting down when we are thinking about the future of the world, we are talking about humanism, right? And the second aspect, the nuance which Tamas was mentioning, was about the equitable, it was about the inclusivity part of it, which he was bringing about. Right? So the democratic values, the inclusive values, the equitable values, the equality values part of it, again, which all of which are pointing back to humanism again. So that's where my question, the next question is going to come from, right? Pointed at Karine, as in, how do we ensure that the future of globalization is inclusive, sustainable, equitable for all the nations? I come from a developing nation, so regardless of their economic status, how do we ensure that the globalization is inclusive, sustainable, and equitable? Karina, over to you.
It's a very difficult question to answer in only some minutes. We can write another book about that, being honest, because it's really a topic that you need to go deep in the data. The Earth is developing in cycles, which is rising sinusoid going up. And we are on the up moment. And if you remember, if we are going back to our book, at the end we wrote that being kind gonna be one of the most important characteristics and one of the most important things that even employers will look in human and bring, because kindness gonna get lost in many things. So I think just being conscious about that in everything we do, being human and being kind should be the first. So like to adopt the technology as a tool, not as a master. What I'm doing, we are developing that new course called Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence in Medicine. And we call it human-centered because we think that the human beings should be in charge. They should understand. That's why it's called also explainable AI. So we need to understand and explain the technology even to kindergarten kids. So at the moment when we are understanding as good as we can embrace the mindset of co-creation with quantum technology and human beings, I'm myself a cyborg. You know, I have several titanium parts, over 9 titanium parts and a pacemaker. So we can actually emerge in brace if we still keep that heart, what we called, which is actually a muscle organ. But the heart, we call it as a spirit, as a human being. If we call the for being human and keeping us humans in control, I think we're gonna master that very well.
I'm loving this beautiful discussion from you, beautiful people. And Karina, you've got another definition now, cyborg, right?
Yes,
Psychology, research, genetics, medicine, education, and cyborg now.
a little bit, a little bit.
A little bit of cyborg is there in all of us. Marga, I'm coming back to you. I love Davos. I especially, and I love the purple scarf which you're wearing.
Thank you. I want to just follow on what Karina said, because it's really important. And she was part of the program that you have mentioned that I launched in 2022, the Geneva Science Diplomacy Week, where we actually try to train the scientists and the engineers who are developing the technology, like the AI, to think about the ethical, the philosophical, the human rights, the social science perspectives, and vice versa, to think about to get the lawyers or the political scientists or historians or more social science humanities backgrounds to understand the science and technology cutting edge breakthroughs that are coming to us. And I think this really calls for rethinking education, as you were saying, Karen, in the beginning. Education. As long as we continue to educate and train people in silos, and we have engineers that only develop the algorithms without thinking about the societal consequences of them, then we have these huge problems that we're seeing on social media, because those, and of course, so there's two dimensions. One is the human and the social science, the humanity dimension of it, and then there's the profit. So it's also the business side, to come together with the governance and the research to think about, to what extent we're going to pursue the profit all the way to the end, even if this creates harm to society, as it has done, right? Polarization and all sorts of negative consequences of the technology. And so that's why I'm focused on training and capacity within education, because changing the leaders of today, changing their mindsets once they've been in leadership for, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years, it's more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult than bringing up the leaders of tomorrow in a different way, in a way that they already bridge those silos, that they can speak the language of science and the language of government, diplomacy, and policy making, and then of course integrate this with ethical and responsible business, and together we can have perhaps a more integrated governance of these advances, because it's really interesting when you put together, and that's what we do in our workshops. And maybe Karine, you could mention, we just do role play games where people take a character from the opposite sector that they are in. So if you are a CEO, you're going to become a diplomat. If you're a diplomat, you're going to be a quantum scientist. If you're a quantum scientist, you'll be maybe the mayor of a city, right? And putting yourself in a completely different perspective is what shows you first how difficult it is to do the job of the other. So instead of, politicians don't listen is always the stereotype, or scientists are impossible to understand because they speak in jargon, right? But if you know why this is, and you get into, you become a scientist for a day or a politician for a day, you understand why, the constraints and all the competing interests, and that's why you don't have, the luxury of time when you try to pitch something to your government representative. So then you need to adapt. And for example, we teach scientists how to speak to policy in a way that is clear, no jargon, quick, and gets the point. Otherwise, if you send a paper or report of 200 pages, obviously the politician is not going to listen. So you need to create those interfaces in the right way. So I think a lot of the solution to what my fellow panelists are talking about in terms of how do we humanize, how do we bridge those silos, it comes from education, changing the way we train people. Of course, we still need specialists and the depth of the expertise. Otherwise, there are no breakthroughs because it requires a lot of deep expertise. So how do we combine that deep expertise with really this kind of transversal skill set and kind of a T shape? There's all these models, right, and frameworks on how to do that. But I really believe that this is the future of how we should be training our leaders in the world that's coming to 2050. And I will have to leave you soon, so I will start walking, and maybe I can show you in the next question, I can show you around Davos and you can get a sneak peek.
Would love to do that, Marga. So when you are showing around the city or the village of Davos to us, Tamas, my well-dressed friend, Marga was mentioning about the very interesting aspect of multi-stakeholder perspectives. How do you put yourself into the shoes of somebody else and see the world? And I would like us to look at that particular nuance, the nuance of multi-stakeholder perspectives, in ensuring that the globalization is inclusive, sustainable, and equitable, especially for the nations which are not economically as strong as some of you in Europe as well as the US. Over to you, Tamas.
Thank you very much, Sangeeth. Yeah, I mean, I think this question is particularly interesting to pose as part of a Davos dialogue, digital Davos, or Marga being physically there, because the Davos conference was established on the back of globalization, when globalization really started to become really relevant for the world and change the world as we know it over the past decades. That's where many of these stakeholders that make the decisions, both from government, business, but also academia and later NGOs, came together and still are coming together to think about these big issues that are impacting our world today. And that's exactly the type of collaboration that we need. So fora like Davos are extremely important. Of course, the United Nations and other fora are similarly important. Now, seeing that the world is kind of becoming less collaborative and more inward-looking in terms of member states looking at their own interests, this is more important than ever to find bridges, find ways to still bring member states and other stakeholders, increasing the private sector who have more and more influence as we see to the table, and discuss big issues that cannot be addressed by anyone or just some stakeholders alone, but only by global collaboration and cooperation. And there's more and more challenges that we will face as we progress that will need that type of collaboration. So it's interesting dichotomy that the world is going into less collaboration and cooperation, while the world's challenges require more and more of that type of collaboration that we have been used to especially after the Second World War. So we have to somehow rekindle that and protect it, and see how we succeed. What I'm now in the Western Pacific region, and by the way, that's also very interesting that we come together and in this digital space, and we are all over the world, right? I'm in Manila, Marga is in Davos, you are in India, Karine is in the US. It's a little bit darker here, while I see it in the US it's morning, and in Davos it's the sun is going down. So this is also a forum where we are talking about global issues, and it's beautiful. What I think is important to note, just to get to the end of my of what I want to say, is that while we look at how collaboration can happen, we should never forget that the earth is something that we did not inherit from our ancestors, but really we have a responsibility towards the next generations. We are borrowing it from from our children, so to say, right? And that's responsibility to what we already heard, to education, through collaboration, through creating new uses of the technologies that evolve, will be crucial. And just let me end by maybe saying a quote that I read recently, which I like, that the question is not whether machines can think, but it's about or the question whether machines can think is approximately as relevant as whether submarines can swim. Yeah, so it's not that's not the question. The question is whether machines will ever be able to feel as humans, and probably the answer there is not, because there will always be an element that will remain human, and that humanity that I also was talking before about is what will help us bridge the gap.
May I add there something, please? Because
Of course.
I am so much agreeing with everything what Tamas said, but you called it humanity. I think there is something for me specifically. I think there is a barrier, which is being a parent, being a mother. That is making me the most human part of myself. So I think that is something that will be the barrier between the human, if you are human or not, feeling that parental feeling that you have a child to protect. And I think that's going to be very human, very important. Sorry, and now you can ask.
What I loved about what Tamar said, he always do. He sparks the next question in me, right? So when he was from humanism to the multiculturalism to multi-stakeholdership, and now we are talking about the young generation. Especially the sentence or the idiom which he was using, that we have borrowed it from our kids. We have not inherited it from our ancestors, but rather we have borrowed it from our kids. I loved it. I loved it. So that's where I go back to my absolute brilliant, multifaceted, multi-dimensional friend Karine again, right? Um, uh, and Karina is incidentally in the process of editing her book again, another book on future. But here, what she is doing is that, which I absolutely love, she's bringing together the youngsters whom we have borrowed our future from, whom we have borrowed our world from. She's getting all these brilliant youngsters, brilliant kids, and she has given them this exercise of imagining the utopian future. What a brilliant exercise, Karine. So, on that note, I want to ask you the question from the youth perspective. Now that you're interacting a lot with the youth and the youngsters and the children of the world, how can they be better prepared to take over the leadership roles in the coming decades?
Well, one thing is sure, we have a great future because we have those great kids. I can, I am really inspired by them. I'm excited to work with them, and kids are calling themselves mirror into future, which is already saying about, but coming back what Marga was speaking about, anticipating future, I'm trying to teach them to systemize their ideas, because kids are thinking without borders and greatly, and are not in these narrow things. And I teach them big dream. What does it mean? Because it's not really like having that big villa in somewhere in your a countryside that you are dreaming, but big dream means dream big, start from, go beyond 1,000 times, make it huge, and imagine unimaginable. And the discussions were very critical because sometimes we were not sure what is utopia and what is dystopia. Because if there is no bad, how you know what is good? If there is everything actually calculated, and if everything is systemized, how you know what would happen if you would do better? You cannot. And the last discussion I have had with kids was, what is the most important currency in this world? And you know what we found out? I said it is human capacity to think. They were not agreeing. And we came back to time. Time is the most important capacity. And I'm agreeing absolutely with Tamas that we borrowed this planet from the kids that gonna live in this planet. And we need to give it in the best condition back to them. So coming back to a futurist perspective or foresight scientist perspective, and coming back to what Marga was saying about anticipating the future, we need to spot the weak signals, the actually the wild cards and black swan events, and don't be afraid of like uh, working with that and listen to margins, foster the curiosity. What can happen? Like, for instance, rapid AI evolution is like wildcard, but also wildcard is cold fusion if we ever will be able to manage that. Nevertheless, if we know if it is coming, to embrace flexible systems to work with that. And if we are prepared with resilience, we gonna have a great planet Earth that we can give back to the next generation. And I hope the book that I'm saying kids, but they are youngsters actually, and very intelligent youngsters. I tried to explain them what is a black swan event, and they looked back to me and said, you know, our whole life was in black swan events from one to other, because this is the most developed, last 20 years are the most fast developing era of planet Earth, and they are right. And they are ready to embrace. And what I love in this, that they are not lazy to read, to come back, and to counter with arguments. And if we teach kids to argument from the different perspective, if we teach youngsters to think about how future is going to be in many perspectives, I think we're gonna win. I am very positive in here.
That's a really interesting perspective, Karine, because and I wanna unpack it a bit along with Marga. Yes, it is great that we are optimistic about the youngsters, but also we have another side to it, as in compared to 10 years back, 20 years back. Youngsters are more into social media. Youngsters are more detached from the physical world compared to the time when we were growing up, right? And I also read in The Economist. I also read in some of the other research reports that the youngsters tend to be lazier compared to the previous generation. They might end up inheriting a world which is in an economic turmoil. They might take longer than us in terms of leaving the homes which belong to their parents. They might rent compared to aspiring for a home, aspiring for a car, all those kind of things which we did, right? So coming back to Marga, uh, are the youth equipped enough? Have we raised our next generation well, despite the technology, despite the vices, despite the economic troubles? Have we raised them well? Are we passing on something good back to them?
I think, Karine, your initiative is absolutely fantastic. And I think these kids should come to Davos maybe next year or in the future to speak to these
We
world
are
leaders. So
ready.
yeah,
We are
exactly.
ready. Because
It
we
is it
spoke about that. They have had even a TEDx talk,
right,
but we
right.
spoke about that they should speak with world leaders. So let's
Yeah,
organize that. We
yeah,
just
yeah.
spoke about that yesterday, Marga. So yes.
Look, and the place I'm in right now, I want to show you because this is the Kulturplatz is where the civil society basically convenes, because Davos is not just about the world leaders and the big figures that are in the Congress Center just behind. There's a whole ecosystem of entities and civil society, universities, different countries put up their houses, like House of Brazil, I see here, House of Ukraine, House of Mongolia, House of Switzerland, obviously. So it's a very rich ecosystem, and there's a lot of space to do things. So this cultural platz is the climate hub, for example. So you can come here every day. There's a million of activities about climate, and there's a lot of things for youth. So I think this is definitely the next step to explore how to bring these voices to the ears of the decision makers, and not wait for these young leaders to be decision makers, which they will be, but still a few years from now. So how do we accelerate that intergenerational engagement? I think this what you see here is one of the spaces that we could very well, yeah, be in next year. So let's work towards that. And with that, I will have to leave you to go to the next session. But I was super delighted to participate. Thanks for having me. And yeah, stay tuned for what comes out of Davos and hopefully good things.
Thank you very much, Marga. Thank you very much for your brilliant opinions and, of course, the purple red scarf which you're wearing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye
Over to
bye.
you, Tomasz.
Bye.
Over to Yes. Tamas, I wanna unwrap it. I wanna unpack the discussion which we have been having. It is about you brought up this discussion about the youngsters. You brought up this discussion about we are borrowing it from the next generation part of it, right? But are we raising a good generation at all, right? Or are we training them well? Are we educating them well? Are they prepared? Are they resilient enough? Are they economically independent enough? Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sangeeth. Very important question, and I think this resonates with all of us. And you see in every answer that we give you, this comes back because it's a crucial element to include. The future is about the next generation, and we cannot think of the future without them. So indeed, thinking about this in an innovative way is also important. And just building also on what Marga just said of including youth and also Karine in the World Economic Forum discussions and dialogues. Uh, the United Nations in 2024, so just a few months ago, at the UN General Assembly in September, had a focus on the future. They called it the Summit of the Future, and they were declaration in support of the next generation. And more than ever before, they actually were including youth groups from all over the world in developing those declarations. So I think the United Nations as a whole, the global community, also recognizes this as a major topic that they have to concentrate. And I also know that all UN agencies, they are reaching out now to youth groups and creating councils of advisors of young generations to advise them on the policies that they make, because they realize that it's not enough to look at it only from one perspective, from the current decision makers, but the issues are always broader and requires a more rich set of perspectives. But just let me also remind us of very positive initiatives like Greta Thunberg that everyone knows by now, and she also has been in Davos a few years ago. Her movement has inspired so many young people globally, right? They all have started advocating for climate action, which is indeed one of the most pressing global issues and challenges that we will face, impacting especially the next generation. And one impact was that in, for example, the Netherlands, there was a youth group I read about the other day that through advocacy, they influenced government to issue new policies to reduce emissions quicker and more impactfully than they would have done otherwise. So that's just an example, but there could be so many similar examples around the world, and I'm sure they are, where youth groups are being heard, are pressing governments and finding their voice. And also just bring some statistics and facts. So today, about 50% of the global population is under 30 years of age. And that's also unprecedented. And that makes the youth today in our world the largest demographic group that there is. So it's a group that we cannot go around. We have to listen to them. And by the way, listening is a crucial skill in diplomacy and global collaboration. That's the first step of coming to any solution. So we have to listen to their voices. Also, another statistic is that about 60% of young people want a career with social impact. That's also something very new and unprecedented. And of course, it's linked to all these things that I mentioned, Greta Thunberg's initiative, the focus on the future by the UN, and all that. So we are creating actually that enabling environment, and that's very positive. But we have to do more. And also because if you look at the other side, so there's a big, very large generation of young people in the world, but at the same time, there's also a growing number of older generation that we have never seen before. So, for example, a statistic or prediction tells us that by 2050, about 1 in 6 people will be over 65 years of age if the trends continue. And that will significantly impact a lot of things, including healthcare systems. But these healthcare systems will have to be funded by the younger generation, right? So the two things are fully interlinked, and it will impact, the society as a whole. So we have to find whole society solutions, definitely including both the elderly and the youth as we move forward. And just to wrap up, and coming back to what Karine said about education, probably in a world like ours, which is growing, is changing at an unprecedented rate, right? As we discussed, we have never seen so many changes around us and complexities. The ability to learn is probably going to be the most important skill as we move forward, and that refers to Karine's comment on education. She said education, 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 and I fully agree. But we have to teach the students of today's in very different ways than we did it in the past. It requires new ways and adaptation of our teaching methods. And this also should go hand in hand by creating platforms for innovation and collaboration led by the youth, by young leaders.
Excellent. I've got 3 more minutes, and I want to cut ourselves from. We have been foresight scientists. We've been anticipating 25 years much ahead of time. Now, I would like to cut us into 2025. Each one of us got 1 minute each. According to you, what are you anticipating the most positive thing to be happening in the year 2025? Karine.
Well, I think in 2025, we're going to use the laser physics and the quantum computing for healing much more diseases as we ever did before, and predicting diseases and cutting them for, preventing preventing people from becoming patients. This is the first thing. And second, we're going to learn to teach empathy as a skill.
Fantastic.
Those are my 2 points.
Brilliant. Tamas, what is the best thing which is going to happen? What is the most gooey thing which is going to happen in 2025?
Well, I think there will be changes that, again, that are hard to predict, but the world will become a bit more challenged and potentially unstable in many ways, politically in terms of crisis, be it climate, health, and also political collaboration will be challenged at many levels. The collaboration between political and business sectors will also be at risk. But at the same time, as I said, I'm optimistic, and it will be a challenging year, which I do hope, based on my optimism, that will create opportunities to move forward, find new ways to maybe on a completely new basis. Like, I find it interesting that Elon Musk is now so prominent, right, in the global stage. Today is the inauguration in the US, and yesterday also he was together with Trump. He's epitomizes, innovation in many ways. And him there symbolizing innovation and technological advancement, besides the most powerful political leader to be in a few hours, means a lot. It's very symbolic of what is awaiting us next year, or this year, sorry. So I think it's about creating the frameworks. Our role is to create the frameworks to ensure that development and innovation remains within the realms of our values, and both ethical and other values, and it serves humanity as a whole, and is in an inclusive way, not leaving anyone behind, equitably, and the best way to predict the future, or even this year, is to create it. And I think we should listen. The act of listening, or the skill of listening, will become even more important this year.
Brilliant, grand. And with that note, Dr. Tamas Landesz, Professor Karine Sargsyan, World 2050. We are signing off from Davos Worldwide. Empathy, humanism, multi-stakeholder perspectives, empowering the youth. What a beautiful future we are looking forward to. Despite all the political challenges, despite all the brokenness of the world which we are experiencing, we still see the shimmer of hope. We still see that good future ahead of us. Thank you so much, Tamas. Thank you so much, Karine. I enjoy you beautiful, brilliant people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was really fun.